Hello, I'm Linda Ann Smith with the ColourArte video creator team. I'm going to show you today how to make Celtic crosses in a steampunk fashion. The materials that I used to make this Celtic steampunk cross began with any acrylic craft paint, black and burnt umber, an 8 by 8 inch canvas board, some scrap cardboard to cut a pattern from, joint compound available at any hardware store or Walmart, golden soft gel gloss medium, primary element artist pigments in persimmon and solar gold, scrap lace in an open weave, creative paper clay available at paperclay.com, gear molds, those are available at hobby stores, texture sheet sampler from genusdesigns.net, silks acrylic glazes in nutmeg, teal zircon, and carmine, and any brand of acrylic spray sealer. I'm going to use the Artist Loft canvas board. They come 5 in a pack, and every other one is separately wrapped in plastic. Pretty high quality for an inexpensive board. I've already painted one of the panels with black acrylic paint, just a basic craft inexpensive paint. I used some scrap cardboard packaging to cut across, and then I cut it on the fold, and then I decided, you know, I don't need to cut the whole cross because I know I'm going to make a lot of these in different shapes with different ends. So if I just cut one piece and then use it in 4 different directions, I can make it longer on one side and shorter on maybe the top, shorter on the sides. Then that's all I need to do is just make sure that I get it at right angles, and I don't need to cut all 4 pieces to save myself some time. So here's some different ones that I have cut, different shapes that I think would make interesting Celtic type hearts or Celtic type crosses. I think I could use this one both ways, either pointing out or pointing in. Sometimes, you know, the centers are hollow even. They have circles in the middle of them. So I just cut lots of different patterns and different shapes that I thought I could use 4 different times. I do like turning the canvas as a diamond shape for these. I think it adds a little drama that makes it more interesting. I'm using a straight edge here. I could have gotten a ruler, but that would just be too simple. I'm using a straight edge to find the center horizontally and vertically on the canvas. However, I want the cross piece to move up from the center. So I'm trying to move it up the same distance. I don't want the cross piece, I don't want it to look like an X, I want it to look like a cross. So I'll mark where I want that to go so that I'll have a good guideline. I'm choosing a fairly simple pattern for beginning this first cross because I know I'm going to have a lot of texture on the canvas before I finish. At least that's my plans now. Of course, I'm one of those artists who works as I go, so I never know exactly where I'm going to end up until it's done. I just made those little pencil marks so that I could, on the pattern, so that I could line it up with the guideline I have on my canvas. And now all I'm going to do is just trace around this 4 different times. Notice that I didn't place this point right in the center. I came down from the center so that it would be longer. Let me show you here. See, it's longer down here for the base of the cross than it will be for the top. And on the top, I'm going to pull it across that guideline I made so that the top part will be shorter. I'll do the same thing for the sides when I do those, but basically making sure that each side piece is the same length. Now, it really doesn't matter if the top piece is the same length as the sides or not. So here's my guideline all ready to go. So now all I have to do is start the fun stuff, which is embellishing the cross. I found this old piece of lace at a thrift store, and it has this stain on it, and probably nobody else wanted it but me, but I knew what I was going to do with it. So I'm going to stretch this out over my board, and I can actually, it may be hard to see on the screen, but I can see the guidelines of my cross through the lace. So I'm going to work in the areas where the cross is not going to be, because this is going to be a background texture for my cross. And I like to use joint compound. This is what it looks like. It's more economical than using a medium from an art store, and I've found that it works beautifully for most textures. I had my little orange tool out to use, but I think I better stick with a palette knife because there's a detail in between these crosses, and I want to be able to be a little bit accurate. I can always scrape it off if I make a mistake, but it's easier to do it right to begin with. So I'll just pick up some joint compound on the end of my palette knife, and if you put a little dab down, it kind of glues that in place, and then you start to spread it. I'm going to spread it up in between. My idea isn't to get exact coverage all over. In fact, as I use this in different areas, I'm going to turn the lace different ways to get multi-textures into the background. It's just to put texture in, not to be a perfectionist. Oops. Well, as you can see, I'm not a perfectionist, but I'm going to scrape that off with my palette knife. It'll be fine. I can always touch it up with black paint later if I need to. I see that I did get over the prongs, or whatever you would call them, the wings of the cross here, so I'm going to scrape that away. I thought I was watching my guidelines, but I guess I didn't quite have it dark enough to see there. Anyway, that doesn't matter again, because we have a way to fix it if it goes wrong. I really like the way this looks. That's going to have to dry completely before I can paint back on top of it or work with this. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the rest of the textures, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, I left this to dry, and all the textures are in the background, and everything's dry, so now I can start painting under everything in black. Trying to leave my guidelines though, so that I can see where the cross is. But I just paint all that texture under in black. And the funny thing is, as you paint, you think you've got it all covered, and then you realize after you let it set for a few minutes that it's not covered at all. There's white specks all over it. You have to go back and touch it up. It's no big deal. It's just be aware that that's going to probably happen. When you get all finished covering this under in black, there'll be another drying time, because everything has to be dry before you can proceed. So you might want to get out your heat gun to use for drying time. Usually I just go do some other project. I usually have several projects going at one time so that I can work on multiples. I learned this when I was a watercolorist, because I got so impatient that I made big muddy messes, and so if I had several watercolors going at one time, I could skip over and work on another one while one dried. So that's kind of been my method in making everything now, especially if I'm going to make multiples. When I do make multiples, I always make them different. No two are ever alike. Each one's an original. I feel like I owe that to my customers, and I'm making these crosses for a art show that's coming up, a craft show, and I just feel like people appreciate it more if they know that theirs is different from everyone else's. This is Golden Soft Gel Gloss Medium, and I'm going to be using it with some primary elements. I'll begin with the color Persimmon from Primary Elements made by ColourArte. I'll place a dab of Golden Gel Medium on my craft mat so that I can mix it with the primary elements. So begin very sparingly when you start to mix. This jar may look small, but it packs a lot of power. If you add less than you think you need, it'll probably be more than enough. I'm dropping it right on top of the gel medium and folding it in, and as I mix, the color will become richer and richer. And keep in mind that the white color is mixing with the pigment, and the white will eventually turn clear, so the pigment will be even stronger than what you're seeing here. This kind of has a dreamsicle color to it right now, but when that white gel medium dries and is clear, more of the pigment will come through. So everything's dry and I can start painting in the cross with this Persimmon color. And I'll start with one coat and then I'll probably add more than one coat to give a deeper, richer color. I'm almost finished painting in the cross, and since I'm going to work next in the background, I don't have to worry about the drying time this time. For my next color, I want to use Autumn Leaf, and since I already have this in Radiant Gel Dimensional Paint, I don't need to do any mixing this time. I'll just use it straight from the jar. I found this little dauber sponge on the clearance rack, and so I'm going to try using it today, and I think there's a little learning curve to it because it wasn't quite going on as well as I wanted it to, because I had the paint kind of messed up on the end in a glob. So I got out a sponge and put paint on it and then daubed it off of the sponge and found that that worked out pretty well for me. I'm sure there's an easier method. I see people using these all the time. I just need to go back and watch some more YouTube videos to see how they use them. But this is the way I used it, and it worked, so that's the main thing. I'm really enjoying that grungy, rusty feeling that the Autumn Leaf over the black gives. I'm using a soft makeup sponge to add just a little of this leftover Autumn Leaf cover onto the top of the cross itself. I'm back to Primary Elements again. This time the color is Solar Gold, and I'm going to put a tiny bit of this on the end of my finger, and while the paint is still wet on the canvas, then I'm going to dab over some of the highlights and give them a little more texture. Now, this is a little too bright for me for background. I really love Solar Gold, but I don't think this is going to be the right color in the background. So I'm going to tone it down later with something over it, but it will give more dimension to my paint to lighten it first with the Solar Gold and then go over it with something else. I'm adding a little more of the Autumn Leaf Radiant Gel to the top of the Solar Gold color that I had, just with a fingertip, and I'll adjust this as I go. But I have all the texture in the background and nothing on my cross, so I need to work on the cross. I have some texture sheet samplers from Genus Designs. That's genusdesigns.net. And I'm going to pull out one of them, and I'm going to use it instead of just as a chipboard enhancement. I'm going to use it as a stencil. It's nice and thick, and it will raise a nice thick texture on top of my cross. I'm pulling out another Radiant Gel also, Radiant Gel Dimensional Paint, to make my texture. It is in the color Indian Copper, and this color is really bright and very metallic, so it'll look pretty on top of the colors that I already have. I'm just placing the chipboard over the cross, and I can see the cross through the chipboard, so that makes it easy to know where to use my palette knife to fill in the dimensions or the textures that I want on top of the cross. I really don't want it to get on the background. And again, if it does, I'll scrape it off, but it's easier to do it right the first time. Creative paper clay is one of those products that you're going to wonder how you lived without. I got this one at Hobby Lobby, but I bought it at Michael's also. It's about $10 for a pound, but that pound goes an incredibly long way. So I use molds from Mod Podge or fondant molds, all kinds of molds. There's many available. And I press the paper clay into that, and I can make very economical steampunk elements for my various steampunk projects. Here I'm going to use some basic craft paint, and I use it in black, and I'm almost out of black, so I'm mixing a little burnt umber with it because those are some nice rusty colors together. I used to hold these down with my fingers to paint them, but I came out an awful mess of trying to clean up my hands, so now I use my palette knife and hold it down, and I also paint them on both sides because sometimes it might be lifted off the page a little or lifted off the surface a little, and you might be able to see up under it. Often too, when you're painting this black under, look back when you get through because there'll be little white spots that you missed and you don't want that to show up. My steampunk gears are ready to go on now, and I'm arranging them, trying to figure out exactly how I want them to look, and kind of came up with what I want. I'm using Aleene's tacky glue. I used to use E6000 on almost everything, but I'm becoming very partial to Aleene's because it's so much easier to control where it goes, and also it's easier for me to clean up. I took a trip to Ireland to visit the land of my mother's ancestors, and while I was there I was told that that center circle on the vertex of the cross was probably made by the craftsman who shaped it, sculpted it to make the Celtic crosses more durable and less breakage on them. Some people think that it is representative of Jesus Christ, and earlier ideas were that it was called a Celtic sun cross because of the circle in the center. Nevertheless, I fell in love with all the different beautiful examples of Celtic crosses that I saw when I was there, and I'm not trying to be authentic or traditional. This is a work of art. My goal is to make a beautiful cross. I'm going to use this nutmeg silks acrylic glazes from ColourArte to highlight some of the or highlight all of the gears that I've glued on, just a little here and there, very lightly, not trying to cover everything, but just give it a highlight. I'll repeat this process with the teal zircon in the silks acrylic glazes. And the last color that I'm going to use is carmine in the silks. Now anytime I use silks, I seal everything once it gets dry because silks are considered a soft acrylic. That means that some products can cause it to move. I find that the spray-on variety of acrylic sealers is easiest to use, and it's also less chance of moving any of the paint that I've already got in place. If you're watching this video on ColourArte's channel, I hope you'll go to my personal channel. I'll list it below in the description, and subscribe to mine also. And if you're watching it on my channel, be sure not to miss ColourArte's, which I'll also place in the description. Go to ColourArte.com for new tutorials every single day. Sign up for their newsletter, and don't forget their Facebook pages. Thanks for watching.